Hello and welcome to the first ever Fuel Hotel Marketing Podcast. I am today's host, Stuart Butler. You can find me on the web, on Twitter at Stuart Butler, StuartButler. And I'm joined today with two of my fellow Fueligans. First is Misha Bakikio.
Hello, world.
Where can they find you on the web?
You can find me at Marketing Misha, Meisha.
Misha has probably the hardest name to spell in the entire company. All right, Pete.
Hi, I'm Pete DeMeo. You can find me at Pete DeMeo on Twitter.
Yours is slightly less difficult to spell, but still DeMeo gives some people some...
I should do that.
Yeah.
It's a P-E-T-E DeMeo. No, last name is D-I-M-A-I-O.
Okay, great. And this is the Fuel Hotel Marketing Podcast. So each week we are going to talk about topics related to hotel marketing. We'll put our own little twist on it. You'll find that there's some entertainment, some knowledge. This is the show where everything's made up and the points don't matter.
I think the points do matter in this case.
Okay,
yeah,
so not everything's made up. Some of it's made up. And the points we make sometimes matter.
Like
is that better?
20%.
So we're better than Whose Line Is It Anyway? Is that what you're telling me?
20% at least.
Yep.
Okay. So the topic today is going to be OTAs. What is an OTA? Does anyone know?
I know.
Okay.
OTA is an online travel agent.
Great. And what is an online travel agent?
It's a great question, Stuart.
You know, online travel agent is, in some cases, the bane of a hotel's existence, but it's also the thing that fuels the bottom line for a lot of hotels.
Yeah.
They take the rate of the hotel and they push it out to a broader audience. It's good, but it's also bad, and we're going to talk about both of those.
Okay, great. So, good example of an OTA is Expedia, Travelocity, folks like that. There's been a lot of consolidation in that industry over the last 12 months. But more importantly, in the topic we want to talk about today is there has been a trend where hotels are pushing back against the OTAs. And, we see a lot of hotels in the industry that we're in, and some of our clients are relying on the OTAs either not at all or 6, 7, 10% of their revenue is coming from OTAs. But we come across hotels that are 60, 70% plus are relying on OTAs, which is obviously not good because, as you guys know, the OTAs take a percentage of the revenue. So in some cases, 15, 20% of the revenue booked is going straight to the OTA and not to the hotel. So obviously eats into your margins and creates some problems with profitability. So where do we want to begin, guys? We want to talk a little bit about what some of these hotels are doing to combat their reliance on the OTA. Some of the big flags like Marriott and Hilton have made a big splash in recent months. Misha, you want to chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the two big flags that we've seen that are really, making a big impact in this industry are Marriott and Hilton. They've both, within the past couple years, but they've really ramped it up recently, have two really strong campaigns that they've been pushing out that are pretty much firing shots at OTAs. The first one is Marriott, and they have a campaign called It Pays to Book Direct, where they're kind of taking a funny spin on it, but they have a whole YouTube campaign, they have social campaigns, they have TV campaigns that are entertaining, but also really pushing people to book direct. It's not, they're not being coy about it by any means. And Hilton recently launched a campaign called Stop Clicking Around, which is, a little bit more focused on the behavior of comparing prices, going to multiple websites to, get the best deal. Their whole spiel is stop clicking around, you can get the best deal with us. And it's been interesting too. I saw an article in Skift today where they talked about the Hilton CEO was at a global summit in Dallas, and he had a rather interesting opinion on the OTAs. They just launched this campaign, and then at the summit he talked about how they have a very healthy relationship and they're really good business partners and they work well together. So it was, almost to me like mixed messaging.
Well, he's playing to his audience, right? To the consumer, he wants to wean them off of OTAs, but to that kind of industry audience, he doesn't want them to think that there's animosity there or there's a battle going on.
And I think you hit it on the head there where the hotels have to be very careful because no doubt a lot of hotel business comes directly from the OTAs. I mean, hotels that are, basically not paying attention or don't have their hands on the wheel are seeing 40+% of their traffic come from the OTAs.
At least, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. I think if you're not savvy as a marketer, it's an easy well to go to, right? Because you can I've got empty rooms this weekend. I can throw them up on Expedia, and I know they're probably going to sell out. But you're not really thinking at long term. Expedia owns that guest. I don't own that guest. If it's an Expedia customer, they're probably going to continue to be an Expedia customer, not my customer. So it seems easy and seems to solve a short-term problem, but at what long-term expense?
Yeah, and that's the tricky question for a revenue manager who's responsible for making sure he does put those heads in beds. You don't want to necessarily cut off the OTAs, but you want to find that balance to where you're owning that customer as much as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want us to come across the wrong way. It's not that OTAs are the evil empire. I think there's a very important role that they play, but it is to find new customers in those down moments when you do have occupancy. But what we see is people have a 365 day strategy for OTAs, which is the same. Whereas some of the folks we work with, they have a more I guess. They split it. They split the year into different sections where they know they're going to fill up regardless of OTAs, and they may not be on the OTAs at that time of year, but then in the off season, the shoulder season, they might. And the big thing and the big battle that we fought with our clients and I think the industry is fighting is rate parity. That's
the hardest part. I mean, if it doesn't matter how great of an OTA campaign you put on, if the customer goes online, does some shopping, and finds that the OTA is $5 cheaper, you will never get that customer.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So what do you think? Is Hilton and Marriott, are they getting any backlash, or do you feel like they're making some progress with these campaigns, Mish?
I think they're getting backlash from the OTAs. I mean, they're certainly, stirring up some controversy because on the one hand, they're saying we have a strong partnership, we really appreciate our distribution channels, but on the other hand, it really seems like they're definitely trying to retrain the consumer. There's so many sites now where you can compare rates, and it's almost like people are trained to do that now. And so they're kind of having to retrain the customers that they have. And I think the brands, Marriott and Hilton, I think they'll have some success with that just because they have multiple locations around the world. If they can train their loyal customers, I think they'll have success with that. But, if people, like I have friends who book hotels and the first thing they do is go to booking.com or expedia.com, and they're very loyal to that, and they would never, in their mind, they would never go directly to a hotel to look at prices. They're just not trained to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everyone's journey is a little different. And I think us working in the industry obviously are not a good indication of what average consumer does. I tend to use OTAs early in the funnel and find the property, and then I'll shop rates on a meta search and find the lowest rate. I like to book direct whenever the rates are equal, but if I'm going to save a few bucks, I probably won't book direct, a lot of times. And I think savvy consumers are acting more like that. So let's talk a little bit about, what the impact the meta searches are having, whether that's a Kayak or a Trivago or even, TripAdvisor's in that game now. So you got two people double dipping in the hotel's pocket in that regard, because you got the hotels in some cases are having to pay the meta search, but then they're also paying commission to the OTA, who is then in turn paying to the meta search as well. So it seems like the hotel is losing, and they can't reinvest that profit back into the property. So ultimately, the consumer's the one that's losing. So where do we see this kind of battle going between direct bookings, meta searches, and OTAs?
I think that's where it really is helpful what Marriott and Hilton are doing by raising awareness of booking direct, because the individual flags or individual properties, they don't have the budget to go out on a national scale and promote the book direct message. But by Hilton, Marriott doing that, it gives people the idea. They have to be very careful, especially if you're an independent hotelier, because you have to manage all those channels. You have to make sure your rate is always the lowest. You have to make sure you're there. But most importantly, you have to make sure that you see the OTAs, meta searches, and all your other channels as a lead gen tool. Yes, they may book with you, but your job is to turn that OTA booking into a in-house booking as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah, and we'll get to some specific tactics to do that later in the show. Where do we see TripAdvisor going? You know, they're trying to play both sides of the fence right now. You've got Trip Connect, which is the more like a traditional meta search, but now they're really pushing Instant Book. And we're seeing some really good success with the clients that are testing Instant Book. And Instant Book is more like an OTA. So, Pete, you want to explain how Instant Book works, like the model that TripAdvisor's rolled out with that?
Yeah, so Instant Book is really interesting. I think this is where TripAdvisor's really, like, to use a saying, is they're kind of dancing on a razor. They don't know really which way they're going to fall. The thing with Instant Book and the way it works is they connect directly to the property's PMS and show rates where the person can book directly on TripAdvisor. The booking eventually goes directly through the hotel property, and the hotel gets the name, address, email, and all the other associated information about that customer. So it's more of a direct booking, but TripAdvisor does take either a 12% commission or a 15% commission, depending on your settings.
Okay, and what's the difference there?
Really, the difference is impression share. So if you have a 12% commission structure with TripAdvisor, they're going to show you to at least 25% of the customers who view your TripAdvisor profile page. If you do a 15%, you'll be shown at least 15% of the time to everyone who visits that profile page. What we found for our customers who have already adopted the Instant Book program is we're seeing 90+% impression share, which is fantastic. We don't expect that to necessarily last long term, but while we have it, we want to make sure we're making the most out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I don't imagine that the OTAs are going to be too prevalent on this channel, because if they're having to pay 12 or 15% to TripAdvisor, and they're only getting 10, 15, 20% from the hotel, then financially it doesn't make sense for them. So Is this really TripAdvisor saying, screw you OTAs, we're going direct and we're going to cut out the middleman and we're going to become the middleman?
No, I think this is TripAdvisor saying that to the hotels, but I think they're trying to be very quiet to the OTAs about that program. And the reason I say that is they're kind of cheating on the OTAs. I mean, for so long, the OTAs owned that TripAdvisor market. Now you have the individual hoteliers coming in, getting 50% or more of the impressions. And here's the interesting part. We monitor both the bookings on Instant Book and bookings on the regular cost per click program that TripAdvisor offers called
Trip Connect.
Trip Connect, thank you. It's about 50-50. Mm-hmm. So they're seeing a lot of their revenue move from their regular cost per click program over to Instant Book. That doesn't bode well for the OTAs.
Yeah, and TripAdvisor has such a phenomenal brand. I mean, we see that, you know, we published a study recently, it's a leisure travel study to 2,900 U.S. and Canadian leisure travelers responded to it, and we saw that over 80% of those folks said they will not book without first looking at a review. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the number one source for reviews is obviously TripAdvisor. We'll probably cover reviews in a lot of detail in a future episode, but people are going to TripAdvisor already, and now they're beginning to book directly on TripAdvisor, which, you know, if I was Expedia, that would make me very, very nervous.
It really is. I mean, from OTA's perspective and from the individual hotelier's perspective, that's the line in the sand. You have to be able to hold and own that TripAdvisor customer if you want to own them long term. So you can if you got them, you can keep them, but you need to get them on TripAdvisor. Right,
and I think the one chink right now with TripAdvisor, what they don't offer, which the OTAs really are doing a good job of, is loyalty. You know, a lot of folks I know that do book on TripAdvisor, they're using the loyalty programs and earning additional nights and things like that.
And I have talked to several people who feel that the OTA mobile apps and mobile experience is far superior to what is currently offered by hotels.
They have a ton of money coming in. I mean, the OTAs are investing a ton of money, a ton of resources, and a ton of research into building that ideal mobile platform.
Yeah, it's frictionless. I mean, you look at Expedia's mobile app, they have the swipe. You can literally, in 3 or 4 clicks, have selected a destination, a property, an actual unit, and you just swipe to the right, and you've booked. Like that, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Like not having to enter in all of your information every time, I think is key there.
Yeah. So, you know, the properties have to step up and invest in this kind of technology and invest in loyalty programs, which obviously the flags are doing, right? I mean, you look at Marriott and Hilton and the other guys, Starwood and such, they're all investing heavily in promoting their loyalty programs.
Oh yeah, and especially for direct bookers, they're offering major perks. I mean, hotel Wi-Fi has been a big topic, and they're offering, free or, increased upgraded Wi-Fi to people that book direct. They're offering additional amenities, resort credits, just all these different perks to really help incentivize people to book direct. And on top of a rate, you can have a better rate parity, but OTAs can't offer some of the things that a property can direct. So
yeah, I stayed in a Marriott in Raleigh recently, and it was really interesting the way they're constantly pushing the free Wi-Fi for either their rewards members or people who book direct. And in every room, it lets you know right away, if you're paying for Wi-Fi, it's because you're not a part of their loyalty program.
Yeah, it's smart, and I think that differentiation is where even the independents can compete, but I don't feel like many independents are doing a good job of communicating the value of booking direct. Obviously, a lot of times they can't compete on the loyalty front, but they certainly can differentiate, right? And I know we've written a couple of blogs on the Fuel website related to that. Any specific ideas you guys have on ways independents can compete and differentiate themselves from the OTAs?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's price. You have to make sure that you are on it in terms of monitoring the rate that you're sharing with the OTAs and the rate you're sharing with customers. A lot of times there's a lot of rules and things you have to abide by, but you can make sure that you're building packages that are compelling and are going to convince the people to book direct.
And I know one of the big disruptors, I don't know exactly how long it's been around, but I know last year it made a big splash, but TripAdvisor, which is a product that's essentially a pop-up on your booking engine that compares prices. So it'll show your price and the OTA prices. And the whole point of it is to showcase that, by booking direct, if your rates are managed properly, it should be lower than the OTAs on this pop-up. And that caused, a bit of a tizzle in the industry because, OTAs were, well, you're supposed to give us the best rate.
And when it first launched, there were a couple of legal issues. I think some of the OTAs kind of went after them, but they've since taken care of a lot of those frustrations from the OTAs in the way they pull the rates and things like that. But TripAdvisor, I think, is one to watch. It's growing phenomenally. We're testing it on a few of our clients now, and giving that consumer the transparency of rate and stopping them from clicking around and having to work for it. I think making it more frictionless for them is critical. But then from the hotel side, the other thing that TripAdvisor does, which I think is almost, if not more valuable than the transparent rates, is they show the hotel every search that someone made, and they'll show where there's rate parity issues. So from a rate manager perspective, they now have a tool that lets them kind of monitor to make sure, it's like a check and balance to make sure that they're not missing some specific date rate region where they yielded the rates up on their PMS, but somehow it didn't propagate to the OTAs.
And when we've helped our clients monitor and manage that for years, it's always been a very reactive process. With what TripAdvisor brings, it makes it, while still somewhat a reactive process, it shrinks that lag time between understanding you have an issue and addressing that issue to, if you're on it, minutes.
Yeah. So rates are one thing. One of the other differentiators I've seen is with some independents are offering, like the ones that have already launched mobile apps. They're offering mobile check-in just for people that book direct and not offering that for...
Well, that's a big one because if you're an OTA guest, you are technically not even a guest of that hotel. You first go through the OTA and then get to the hotel. So a lot of times those customers don't even have access because they don't have a confirmation number. So it's one of those tools that OTA or that the hotels can offer to make it pretty compelling.
Yeah.
I think one thing that the OTAs really will never be able to do is control that person and that guest on property.
Yeah, the experience, right? Which is the most important part of the funnel.
And if you've ever checked into or tried to check into a hotel and they tell you, I'm sorry, we don't have your reservation, you booked with Expedia, then you're on the phone with Expedia, you have your kids waiting in the car, it's not a happy experience. Getting the hotels to show the customers that there's a better way is paramount.
Yeah, I actually have a little story. I was checking into a hotel last summer, and right next to me were a couple that were checking in, and I had booked direct. They had booked through Expedia, and this particular property had multiple buildings. And 3 of the buildings were oceanfront, but they had a couple of buildings that were not oceanfront. So they were showing up, and it was a beach vacation. They were expecting to be oceanfront, and they had booked through Booking.com, and they had picked one of the off-ocean units. So they went to the front desk, and they told them where they checked in. They said, okay, here's directions to get to that building. And they were pissed. I mean, they were like, we're staying at the beach. Why are we not? And there was not a lot the hotel could do because they had booked through a third party that hadn't made that clear to them that it wasn't. You know, in this case, they had great customer service and found a unit that was available, that was oceanfront, and were able to upgrade them. But, you know, that they were lucky in that case. But the OTAs don't necessarily give the full transparency in some cases like that.
You said something really important, that the customers were upset. And at the end of the day, the OTAs are about moving person from A to B, taking the commission and moving on. For the hotelier, the customer standing in front of them is on their probably one annual beach vacation, mountain vacation, whatever it might be. And it's super important for a customer. So for hotels really need to explain that to the customers while they're doing the booking process. You know, thank you, Hilton, Marriott, for pushing Booking Direct, more aggressively. But it's so important for a customer. We want to make sure that the hotels make the most of it. There's one thing that I really love. Trump, aside from any political side, they're doing something really interesting at their Trump Las Vegas property, where if you book direct, you have a 4 p.m. checkout time.
Right.
Everybody else, it's 2 or 3 p.m. So it's those defined reasons why if I book direct, I'm getting more value for my money, regardless of the rate I pay.
Right. Yeah. And I've seen some on the flip side doing early check-in as well. So early check-in, late checkout, which is obviously valuable. Some folks do, like if they have a little arcade or game center in the hotel, they might give a free $5 towards that. You know, so there's a lot of incremental, or food and beverage. They can even do that. You know, you touched on something really interesting, right? Expedia, although they own the customer, in the customer's mind, they're obviously staying at the property. So if they have a negative experience, say in the case they booked an off-oceanfront room, thinking they booked an oceanfront room, and they go and stay and have a negative experience, there's no ramification there for Expedia. The ramification is for the property, because they go on TripAdvisor and they don't review Expedia, they're reviewing the property, right? So the property's kind of in this tough position where they've got to make good on someone else's promise, which isn't always fair. Yeah. So I think we kind of agree in general that it's in the hotel's best interest to incentivize folks to book direct, to manage their rates in such a way that it does encourage direct bookings. But inevitably, some people are going to book via an OTA, and some people that's a benefit. We talked about the mobile app and that frictionless experience. But when we did our survey, and you can download that survey, it's the second time I've mentioned it, from fueltravel.com/study. When we did that, we noticed that it was about 13.8%, if memory serves, of people said they start their research on OTAs. And it was almost the exact same number of people said they finish, they actually book on the OTAs. So that kind of suggests to me that the folks that start on OTAs are going to stay on OTAs and book. The folks that don't and are more likely to book direct don't even start on OTAs. So it kind of it goes against the argument which a lot of people make, which is you need to be on the OTAs in order to get exposure for people to then. Like, some people look at OTAs as an advertising expense because it gets you out there and your name recognized. But our study would suggest different to that. It suggests that if you're an OTA booker, you're going to start and finish there. I use OTAs somewhere in the middle. Yeah. I'll research the destination, sometimes look at TripAdvisor, sometimes look at Google. Somewhere along the line, maybe look at Trivago or Kayak. But I don't usually start on an Expedia or Hotels.com.
No. And that's why the individual hoteliers have to look at the OTAs as a lead gen tool. Yes, it may take a year between the time the customer first stays and when they come back. But when that person's checking in, getting their email address, providing phenomenal customer service, and turning it from the Expedia customer to the individual property customer, that is really where hotels can shine. They can take that customer back from the OTAs, but it all starts at check-in. They have to make sure they get that email address because that's your only line of communication to that customer when they
Right. Ideally, it would start before, right? But you have no way to contact that customer before in a lot of cases. Some are different. Like you said earlier, TripAdvisor is actually one of the few, quote unquote OTAs that gives you contact information earlier. But Expedia, Booking.com, a lot of these guys, you don't necessarily know who's coming to check in, and you know their name, but that's it. So what are some things? I know you'd written a blog post on this, I think, Pete, a while ago, which you guys can check out on fueltravel.com on our blog. But what are some things that so knowing that there's going to be a percentage of people that book through an OTA, what are some things hotels can do to reclaim those customers as their own?
Right. So the very first thing that they have to do is get more information on that customer. Start building that customer's portfolio, understanding who they are, getting that email address. Once you do that, you can communicate with them at the property, incentivize them if you have a property app to download that app and start that relationship. From there, they've already checked in that first time. You're going to offer them a lot of exclusive benefits like the late checkout and early check-in that you mentioned, Stuart. You're going to offer that to them on the next day. But on this day is really about getting that fish on the hook and making sure that you own that customer. From there, when they check out, you have their email address. So ask them specifically, not through Expedia, how their stay was. Send them a post-stay survey, get some information. And while you're doing it, make it a little jab or two with the OTAs and let them know that, hey, did you know if you book direct, not only do we guarantee the best rate in most cases, but we can also give you this benefit, and this benefit. All that leads to, a customer of the individual hotels at the end. The other things you can do as well is while they're searching, even if someone starts on the OTA, we know that they make multiple searches throughout their shopping process. So they may start on Expedia, but they're going to go to Google. They're going to go to Bing, and they're going to search that property's name. It's tough, but you have to pony up the money, and you have to be in the brand PPC game. I mean, Misha, you can really speak to that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we have had, some clients that are totally on board, some clients that are a little hesitant and they don't see the value in that. But brand PPC is incredibly important. I mean, you might rank first organically. I hope your site is optimized and it ranks organically, but you have OTAs that are actively bidding on your brand. So your organic listings are going to be pushed down, and then if people click on the Expedia or the Booking.com listing, even if they book with you, you're still going to be paying them a commission that's way more expensive than the couple of cents that you would have paid for them to click on your PPC ad. And branded PPC tends to be highly qualified, so the chances of people booking are much higher, and it's much cheaper than some of the more broad, less qualified search terms. So it's really a no-brainer in our opinion for hotels to run on their own brand.
So looking at the search results page, if you are a number one ranked hotel for your brand,
Organically?
Aren't you at the very top of the results?
No, absolutely not. So, Google's doing everything they can to monetize the SERP. So you've got paid ads at the top. Often then you've got Google HPA under there, which again is the OTAs are bidding on those keywords. And then sometimes you've even got the accelerated mobile pages now and some other stuff. So one organically in terms of true rank now is sometimes 7, 8, or 9.
Oh yeah, we've seen it's below the fold in a lot of cases, particularly if it's not an exact match brand name. So you're going to be below the fold organically. So you really want to be in that top visibility. And we're even seeing, as far as hotel price ads is concerned, we're seeing them roll that out to, it started out as, X city hotels, pretty broad terms. And we're seeing them get more specific with more long tail modifiers on top of that. So people are getting more specific with their searches, and HPA is continuing to roll out. And now we're even seeing that even if you are a brand name that has more than one location, so you might type in Marriott New York City, there might be a few locations, they're going to have an HPA block there.
You mentioned HPA a few times, and we know about it internally, and the savvy marketers know a lot about HPA, but let's step back for a second and just it's almost like another meta search. Tell us a little bit about HPA.
So HPA rolled out, I want to say it launched in 2012, but they didn't really start dedicating resources to it or really pushing it out till about the 2014 timeframe is when we started getting, more involved with it. And that's really you'll see it whenever you go to Google and you search pretty much any hotel related query. And it's highly personalized. If you're logged in, so they try to make it as relevant to you as they can. But what you'll see is you type in, hotels in some destination, and they'll provide you with a list, and it's usually presented in a 3-pack with a map. And then you can click on that, and it'll take you to a completely new page that does not have any paid ads or organic listings. It's the entire hotel price ads listing. And what hotels can do here is they can participate in a bidding system. And it's different than how the traditional AdWords works. It's very different as far as how you bid. You actually have different buckets that you can bid on, and your bid can be based on how many days are searched. So if somebody's searching for a 1 or 2 day stay, you're not going to pay as much as if somebody were staying 7 days. So it's taken, at least on our end, a while for us to fully understand the functionality and, the best way for us to utilize it for our clients. And it's definitely been a game changer. I mean, this wasn't existent until just, maybe 2 years ago. It started really blowing up, and it's really throwing a wrench into not only the OTA meta search game, but PPC and organic search.
Yeah, there's a lot of new players. I mean, the OTAs are playing in the HPA space.
Yeah, and I think we can probably do a whole nother episode on HPA. Yeah. I don't want to get too deep into that, but needless to say, when you pull up a search result for your brand, say my hotel name is the Hotel Metropolitan, I'm going to see probably 2 or 3 ads for OTAs. Then I'm going to see probably my local listing, which has got HPA, which is 2 or 3 ads for OTAs. And if I'm not bidding on HPA, I don't exist there really. Then it's my organic listing. Then it's a bunch more OTAs. So it sounds good to have number 1 organic listing, but really you've got one shot out of about 20 options on that one page. So to not be participating in brand PPC is ludicrous, especially when you see the return, which is 15, 20 to 1 at least, versus paying 15, 20% to an OTA, So I think brand PPC is another topic we can talk about. We're kind of running short on time for today's episode, but what are your takeaways from today?
It's one thing that I take away, and I think a lot of the hotel marketers have found is it's not a silver bullet. There's no one thing that you can do. You need to make sure that you have price parity, that you're the best. You need to make sure you're offering your guests something exclusive for Booking Direct. You need to data mine the customers who are booking through an OTA, and then you need to contact your customers and make sure they know Booking Direct is the key for their next stay. So there's a lot of different meta searches out there. There's TripAdvisor, HPA, and you kind of have to be in all of them if you really want to put a dent in your OTA business.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the kind of hotel that it's happy with 50 to 60% of your revenue coming from an OTA where you're giving away 15, 20%, then, fine. But I think for most hotels, they're looking to reduce that.
What are they looking to reduce it to? What's a good number to shoot for?
I think it depends on the type of property. I think if you're in a repeat destination, where there's a lot of independence, realistically, it can be 5 to 10%. I mean, even some of our clients are at 0%. They don't even dabble at all. They have such brand recognition, and these are independent hotels. Their brand recognition, their repeat visitation is so high because they create such customer loyalty through great customer service that it can be 0. But I think if you're in a city where there's a lot of business travel, you're going to be higher. But I think if you're anywhere above. If you're a non-flag property, because if you're a flag, it's very different. You're going to get, if you're a Marriott, you're going to get the Marriott loyals. If you're Hilton, you're going to get the Hilton loyalties. But if you're an independent in a destination and you don't have good organic reach and you're not bidding on some broader keywords, then I don't know, 20, 30% would be the most that I would tolerate. But I'd try to get it below that.
Yeah, and if you're a revenue manager listening, we're not saying that you need to go from 40% down to 20%. We're saying you need to go from 40% to 39%.
Yeah, and
find out what you can do, 38, and just chip away at it. it's a value to have the traffic from the OTAs, but you also got to remember it's a value that you're paying 15 to 20%, of your nightly rate for.
And it's a process too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a long-term process, a long-term goal. And it's also going to take, educating your customers and changing their behavior, which can be difficult to do sometimes.
Yeah, those customers are stubborn for sure. If you want some help with any of this stuff, Fuel offers a lot of the services we discussed today in terms of brand PPC, organic search. Also, download our study at fueltravel.com/study. We've got a lot of blogs and case studies on our website at fueltravel.com as well. I think there is actually a case study on there related to brand bidding and shows the ROI on there. So before we leave, guys, anything else?
That's all I had. Hopefully people enjoyed the podcast and are ready for a lot more of these to come.
Yeah, maybe so. What about you, Misha?
My only leaving words of wisdom would be bid on your brand by all means, please. And if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to, find us on Skype or, email us info@fueltravel. We'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, and we're going to be adding a section to this podcast in future episodes, a Q&A. So ask a Fueligan. So if you want to hit us up on Twitter at Fuel Travel and ask us questions for our podcast, then we'll be glad to read those out on future episodes and try to do our best to answer them. But from all of us here in sunny Myrtle Beach, see you next time.